Yes, indeed, Heather, you do get an opportunity to answer questions. Thank you very much. That's assuming you're on the line, which I think you are, but you do remember to unmute because, and then thank you very, very much indeed. So it's great to have that. It's sort of, well, oh, I can see Fran has already jumped in there from my group. I was going to ask the same question. So Fran was saying, what was the outcome of this outbreak for the puppies? Heather.
Yeah, this is Heather. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, perfect.
Great. For the puppies, they had self-limiting infections and their diarrhea resolved. For some of the people, they got quite severe infections and had to be hospitalized, and there wasn't a lot of antibiotic choices to treat the infections. But yeah, of course, I was more concerned about the puppies than the people too.
Yeah, I mean, was this to do with a particular puppy farm, or was it to do with their food? I mean, it sort of goes back to the old psittacosis sort of days of the parrot disease, of the heroic days of the CDC, doesn't it, in a way, the sort of pan-state outbreak?
Yeah, it goes back to a particular store, and I believe it was associated with particular breeders that provide puppies to that store, but really some of the cleaning practices within the store were subpar. In some cases, I guess people were cleaning up puppy pins with a hose and then eating a sandwich in the other hand. So there was lots of opportunity for cross-contamination there.
Oh dear, oh dear. The Cannies actually asked something again from, perhaps you could talk a little bit about the reason, well, the advantages for you as a public agency of using the API and using using your own databases, rather, obviously, and having that link. Maybe Heather, you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so currently we have a local copy of the Core Genome MLST scheme, and I think at the time there wasn't the opportunity to do API calls for the Core Genome MLST scheme to PubMLST, and also just because of the assignment workflow for going through a curator for allele calls, we have a way to assign them locally, and then we hope to in the future pull the Core Genome MLST calls from PubMLST, so we're in sync with a PubMLST database. And then for sequence type in clonal complex, it's helpful to have the information to kind of put in context what we're seeing in the US compared to other public health agencies around the world. So that has been a really useful tool to get that information in real time through the API calls.
That's great, thank you. Yeah, and I mean, of course, this is the sort of information, again, that you really want to have in a private database, don't you? You have to have all the epidemiological information. I mean, there's all sorts of sensitivities in the sorts of data that you're handling with. So having your data in a completely separate box within your safe environment, when then just sucking in the typing data really is ideal, because you get the best of both possible worlds, don't you? You can you make sure that you're using the international nomenclature, but you're also keeping your data absolutely secure.
Yep, and we have to do that.
Yeah.
I can't imagine hitting PubMLST servers with the thousands of Campylobacter we get per year and hundreds per month. It's also playing well within the sandbox to not do that. But yeah, we also, within our metadata, have information that we cannot share outside of PulseNet.
Yeah, and Kelsey has asked, coming with another question here, just asking about what your flow of isolates are. Are they coming from hospitals? And if so, how do you decide which ones you sequence? Because as you just said, there must be a load.
Yeah. So within our states, they receive isolates from clinical labs and diagnostic labs that are sent to the public health lab for sequencing. So in some cases, these are samples that come from people going to their general practitioner and having a sample collected, and if Campy is identified, they forward that isolate. In some cases, they're associated with hospital clusters or skilled nursing facility clusters. So we get a assortment of different clinical cases, and it also depends on the state. So some states have reporting rules where they have to forward Campylobacter to the public health lab, and some states don't. So it also depends on where the isolate is identified, whether or not it will make it into our PulseNet system. But we get several thousand Campylobacter isolates per year, and for other organisms, we're well over 100,000 per year.
We've got, thank you. We've got an excellent question here from She Ran, actually, which could be an entire event itself. And just to say to everybody, we're thinking that maybe there's been such an interest and this has gone so well, we're thinking about maybe having more of these kinds of events at intervals, maybe that talk about specific topics. And the specific topic here, which I think is one that we could spend a lot of time talking about, but maybe you could just give some practical indications on this, which is, how do you define the threshold to determine an outbreak event?
Yeah, that's a really great and really challenging question, because it really depends on the outbreak. So for the puppy example, that outbreak event occurred over 2 years and was associated with animals. So we would expect to see a higher number of allele differences in that cluster, outbreak cluster, than if you had kind of a point source food outbreak, which in the US, chicken livers is a common vehicle for Campy food-associated outbreaks. So for Campy in particular, it's really hard to define a threshold or a cutoff, and really depends on the outbreak dynamic. So we constantly are scanning the database and kind of looking for clusters of isolates that are closely genetically related, and then we kind of drill further into it to look to see if there's any epidemiologic links. And then if we find something that's linked, we may look at kind of a broader threshold to see if there's any other cases that may fit with this outbreak. So it's, unfortunately, there isn't a hard and fast threshold, which makes it a bit challenging sometimes.
We still need the epidemiologists, don't we, Heather? We still need the epidemiologists. And as you say, it can be both ways with Campy. You can either have very long-lasting outbreaks with identical organisms, which apparently are not linked, which must have been a bit the case with the puppies. That must have been quite a difficult one to untangle. And then on the other hand, you can have a chicken liver outbreak where you've got many, many different types of Campy within the chicken liver, all causing disease at once. And it's the source it's the point source that's the focus, not the bug, because the bugs can be really different. It's fascinating. That's amazing. Now, are there any more questions, or we could go on and on, but I think but that's a wonderful presentation. Thank you. And I'm glad to see from your colleague that the puppy story is going to be published. I think we'll all be looking we're going to go that. Oh, and Rachel is saying, who told us it's going to be published, but also it caught the attention because it was a rare ST type in an MDR profile. So the chat's great. Please do look at the chat if I've missed anything, and people can always and maybe Heather and your colleagues could check if there's anything that I've missed that you can answer. But I think we should move on to the next talk. Because try and keep up to time as best as we can. So thank you again very much indeed, Heather.